Plasticity at a synapse can occur when the connection between neurons is either strengthened or weakened over time, and scientists often use the term potentiation and depression to describe this strengthening and weakening of synaptic connections. These types of synaptic plasticity are important for information storage in the brain, and they're thought to form the neurophysiological foundation for learning and memory. Of course, a mechanism that can make synapses stronger or weaker is all fine and good, but we must also specify how the system knows to make those synapses stronger or weaker. We need an organizing principle. One of the most influential ideas for organizing long-term synaptic plasticity was first articulated by the Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb in 1949. Hebb stated, "Let us assume that the persistence or repetition of reverberatory activity tends to induce lasting cellular changes that add to its stability. When an axon of cell A is near enough to excite a cell B and repeatedly or persistently takes part in firing it, some growth or process of metabolic change takes place in one or both cells, such that A's efficacy as one of the cells firing B is increased." Today, this postulate is known as Hebb's rule, Hebbian theory, Hebb's postulate, or cell assembly theory. It's often simply summarized as cells that fire together wire together. Or, in its reverse, neurons out of sync lose their link. Hebbian learning is at its root a kind of associative learning. That is, Hebb's rule tends to associate together the firing of a presynaptic and postsynaptic neuron and strengthens those connections where the firing of the presynaptic neuron tends to predict the firing of the postsynaptic neuron. One of the reasons that Hebb's rule is so appealing is that it provides a simple model for many phenomena seen in human and animal behavior. If you've taken a psychology course, you may have heard the story of Pavlov's dog and so-called classical conditioning. In the early 20th century, a Russian psychologist named Pavlov found that if he repeatedly paired the sound of a bell with the taste of food in dogs, he could elicit salivation from the dog in response to the sound of the bell, even in the absence of food. Hebb's rule provides a compact theoretical explanation for such learning, since one could imagine neurons associated with the sound of the bell forming synapses with neurons that ultimately drive salivation behavior. While the connections between the auditory neurons and the neurons driving the salivation behavior are probably initially weak, pairing the bell and the other stimulus that evokes salivation gradually potentiates the sound to salivation synapse. While it's probably unlikely that a network quite as simple as this exists in the dog's brain, it's nonetheless not hard to imagine how phenomena such as classical conditioning could be built from Hebbian mechanisms. Indeed, Hebb's rule can form the basis of a variety of powerful computations, and such mechanisms are a staple component of many different models of learning. Another reason for Hebb's long-lasting appeal is that it's beautifully consistent with what is known about the molecular mechanisms for certain kinds of LTP. Hebb's rule certainly doesn't provide a complete picture for how learning happens in the brain, but the connection between Hebbian theory, long-term potentiation, and the molecular clockwork of the NMDA channel is one of those wonderful cases in neuroscience where theory, physiology, and molecular biology all intersect to form a deeper picture of how the nervous system works.